It is great to be with you, and I'm so excited for this coming year. Thanks for your warm welcome. And I had a question, actually, I hadn't asked. If I move around here, will the camera be able to follow me?
Yes, especially now that you told them.
Yeah, okay. So he said, especially because I told them. I look forward to getting to know you over this coming year and maybe even longer. This is an exciting time. Next week I won't be with you. I'll be in Chicago starting the fall semester at Meadville Lombard. I am a part-time minister here, but then you'll be seeing me on a regular basis after that. So 5 years ago on a hot summer day, I found myself in Japan in the Mie Prefecture, halfway up a mountain. It's about 2 hours or so from Tokyo on the bullet train. And I'm on this mountain, and I have a bamboo broom in my hand, and I'm sweeping a gravel path. Sweeping in the morning, the debris from the trees overnight, and the leaves. And this is one of the morning rituals I am taking part in because I was staying at the Subaki Grand Shrine. It's a long-time partner to many international groups that Unitarian Universalists are a part of. And I was there during a three-week stay. And I'm sweeping, and I'm wearing the white robes of a novice Shinto priest. And as I'm sweeping up the leaves, I'm watching the people who are going up for their morning rituals, and I'm noticing the other priests who are around me. The chief priest is next to me, the other head priests are there, and the other novice priest. We're all sweeping. This is a daily ritual, as long as it's not raining, at the Shinto shrine. And it's one of the practices of the Shinto Subaki Grand Shrine and shrines across Japan. Now, our morning sweeping ritual was a daunting task because the Subaki Shrine doesn't sit in an open field where the forest is on the edge. It sits in the middle of a forest, towering all around us. The trees are lining the paths, but they're also in the middle of the path. So you're sweeping up leaves that are all around you, and every morning there's a lot of leaves, even in the summer. And as you're sweeping, leaves are falling, as they do in the summer. Have you noticed that? Leaves still fall in the summer, even here in Tulsa. They float down, and when you're trying to sweep them up, it can be, okay, there's another one. We would do this sweeping ritual for quite a while until the beating of the tiger drum to call us to the morning worship. Now, for the Shinto, sweeping the paths with the bamboo broom is not just sweeping. Sweeping is an important ritual, as I said, to the shrine. The clearing away of the leaves from the sacred paths is an act of purification for the shrine grounds, and a reminder to each of us that we are all a part of nature. Human beings are intimately connected to nature and the many expressions of the divine for the Shinto. Now, the Shinto priests teach us that we are all born shining and gleaming and pure. And we might imagine, as Marlon said this morning, that we are all a part of the stars, shining and bright and gleaming, born that way. But then, over time, our lives gather debris, like the gravel path sitting in a forest with leaves slowly falling. Those bits of debris gather on our shining, gleaming ways, the actions of others. We experience our own actions, diminish our shining, negative places and spaces, what we might call oppressive structures and systems that obscure our harmonious connection with the natural world, with one another, and with ourselves. To return to this harmonious state, the Shinto teach we need renewal. We need a way to come back into harmony with nature and our own brightness. And it was an appealing idea to me. It was something I yearned for, coming back into harmony with myself and life. And perhaps it's one of the reasons I embarked on this trip to Japan. We had a student who was set to go and had to cancel last minute. I said those fateful words, I always wanted to go. and that set the ball rolling. But I must have really wanted to go because I'm also allergic to shellfish. And it's such a part of Japanese culture, it made parts of the trip very, very challenging. And yet I went, and I survived, and I went, and had this remarkable experience. And a big part of it was, of all the things, the sweeping. After the morning ritual, I said we would go and have a ritual service of purification. We would chant a Japanese prayer. When I went to the shrine, I imagined this is what I would do on a daily basis, that I would study Shintoism, that I would do Japanese calligraphy, and that I would take in the natural beauty of this shrine that had worshipers there for over 2,000 years. So a very sacred place in Japan. It was in a time, though, that I found one of the most important parts of my experience was the sweeping. You see, for 2 decades had gone by, and since I had said yes to going into the ministry, since I was 25 years old, I have been a minister, a Unitarian Universalist minister. I've had other periods of vocational discernment, like when I left my beloved congregation after 8 years to go get a PhD. And it was time I felt that I needed to enter into serious discernment again about my vocation. Even if I would continue on the path that I was on, and I did, I needed renewal of my life in other ways. I was hungry for something more. What is your vocation? You online, you sitting here in this sunny space in Tulsa on this afternoon, what is your vocation? Are you in a place where you're wondering what you should do with your life next week, next month, and the next few years? Now, the Latin word for vocation, the Latin root, I should say, for the word vocation is voice. And so it's listening for the calling of a voice. So sometimes you hear about people talking about vocation as a call to do something. For some people, they believe the calling comes from an external source like the goddess, God, or some kind of divine entity. Others interpret vocation as a goal to work towards, often associated with the helping professions as ministers and doctors, lawyers, therapists, and nonprofit workers, and other occupations. Another school of thought thinks about vocation as a set of noble ideals and values that you work towards. You often would have maybe a great leader in their social justice movement as your goal to become like that person. And that would be very much kind of the American mindset. I have a goal. These are the things I need to do to get to that goal. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to train myself to be like this person. And yet another perspective on vocation is an inclination towards an occupation, yes, but also art or service. That you find that you have particular skills with painting, illustrating, drawing, sculpture, arranging flowers is an artistic expression, photography, weaving. In other words, your vocation may also not necessarily be the job that you have to support your life and your family. A vocation can be fulfilled through work that you do on the side or that you do as a hobby. It could be a part of your social justice work. Your activism is the thing that is your vocation, but it may not be a part of your everyday job. Parker Palmer, the Quaker teacher, activist, and writer, wrestles with these questions in vocation in many of the books he's written over the years. And it's Palmer's definition of vocation that I use as a professor at Meadville Lombard, where I'm training the next generation of ministers. It's a definition that I come back to throughout my own life, and I think about it a lot as I came here today as your new program minister, part-time, here at All Souls. Parker Palmer invites us to think about vocation not as a goal, not as a particular kind of profession. He wants us to seek and listen for our own vacation or vocation inside of us. To listen not for a call outside from a mentor or a friend or someone we see on TV, but instead it is listening to your life. Listening to your life for who you are and what you are meant to do. And when I say listening, there are many ways to open yourselves to the sensory moment, to reach in and to reflect on what is deep inside of your heart. Palmer, talking to one of the members of the Quaker congregation he was a part of, received advice from her on this topic. She said, before you tell your life what you intend to do with it, listen for what it intends to do with you. Again, you can say listen or study or spend time with or reflect. Before you tell your life what truths and values you have decided to live up to, let your life tell you what truths you embody, what values you represent. Now, for those of us who have marginalized identities, the listening process is extremely challenging. In a world where it's sometimes difficult to reconcile what we know about ourselves inside of us and what the world tells and says about us through word and action, and they don't measure up. That makes the vocational work extremely difficult, having to sort through, and sometimes people talking about as they do that vocational work from marginalized identities, that they feel divided. And so how to bring yourself into a united whole. And for all of us, reflecting deeply on our lives can be frightening. It's leaning over the edges of our lives and looking at the sharp places, the places of discomfort that we may have avoided for a long time. It's the places where we've had an inclination that you have a desire to explore a new way, a new artistic expression, but you're too afraid to start. You're afraid to fail. There's so many ways that we stop ourselves in this vocational work. And so it may sound simple advice to take the ancient Socrates statement of know thyself, but then to actually do the work is a whole nother matter. Parker Palmer says that most of us struggle with vocational discernment. We are told not to get our information about ourselves from ourselves, but from others. Parker has observed over the years that in leading lots of retreats a lot of times on vocation and teaching, from time to time, participants would show him their notes. They would come up and say, hey, I want to share with you some of the notes I took and how I was moved by this retreat. And he's discovered, with very few exceptions over the years, the notes people take are what the retreat leader says, and maybe what another wise person in the room says, but never what the person who has the notes. They don't take notes on what they say. They don't write down their own reflections about how they were engaging in the moment. We find guidance everywhere except from within. This is one of the reasons I encourage people in my classes to journal or embrace Julia Cameron's morning pages from her classic book, The Artist's Way. Regular journaling, however you do it, can be a powerful feedback loop. And you don't have to write it all down. That's hard for some of us. It could be dictating it. It could be drawing it. But some kind of reflective practice that gives you an opportunity to see what is dwelling in your heart. It's always a surprise about the morning pages. First thing in the morning, you wake up and you write whatever comes to your mind for 3 pages. And sometimes, a lot of times, I've been surprised. That's what was on my mind this morning. That's what I've been carrying around this week. That's what I'm thinking about. That's what I'm excited about. That's what I'm worried about. Now, my stay at the Subaki Grand Shrine and the rituals of the Shinto reminded me of the necessity to revisit my vocation from time to time. I had made my life very busy right before that trip. And in that time of the morning ritual of sweeping, sort of like when we Reverend Marlin asks us to sit still for a while. It's hard to do that in this life. And so sweeping made me slow down, made me come back into my body, grounded me, so to speak. And there, in the far away from the demands of daily life, I began to see that I needed to work on my vocation again, to see where I was at, what was next, what was inspiring me and giving me the most life. But I also had to wait, because vocational reflection is not something that I could do in Japan, away from the daily demands of my life and my family and my friends and my colleagues, my community. Vocational discernment is done in community when it's at its best, so that as you are listening and reflecting and finding ways to dig deeper inside of yourself, you're able to share that with others and to process it and to think with one another. Vocation is not something we do once as well. It is not something we check off the list and we're done. It is a process of recommitment and exploration throughout our lives. So as we move into this new period in the life of this congregation, I hope that you will spend some time digging in with me and thinking about what brings you great joy, what values are at the center of your heart, to really do some of that deeper reflection. And to know that it can be scary, that sometimes you want to back away, and maybe this is why you avoided it, but it can be really, really powerful. And so that maybe you'll keep that in your mind as you leave here today. I'll share a story that Parker Palmer tells about an experience he had at Outward Bound, the outdoors program that he did in his 40s, where he learned that lesson very, very well. He had, since he had heard about the Outward Bound program, he had been very excited about everything the program had to offer except one thing, that apparently in the middle, they make you essentially rappel off the side of a 110-foot cliff. And he wasn't so interested about that, just a rope and a harness, and you're leaning out over the void. There's nothing under you but the ground 11 stories below. And he, as one might be, was a bit intimidated by that situation. In fact, he was terrified. But this is his reflection on that moment and what he learned. So he had looked down and noticed that there was, at the first part, there was like 5 feet down, a drop. And then about 10 feet down, there's another drop. And then you go all the way down to the bottom, to that 11 stories below. And so he set out, he leaned back, the harness is secure, they did the safety checks. He's trying to negotiate that first drop, and his feet goes out from under him and he hits the wall of the cliff. Well, the instructor yells out to him, "I don't think you quite have it yet." Very observant. "You're leaning too close to the rock face. You need to lean out much farther back so your feet can grip the wall." Well, and these are the words of Parker Palmer. He says, "That advice, like so much advice from spiritual traditions, went against every instinct. Surely one should hunt the wall, hug the wall, not lean out over the void." But there he went, and he tried it again, and on the second drop, he tried to lean back better, but not far enough, and he hit the second ledge with a thud, not unlike the first, and his ever-observant instructor said, "You still don't have it. Try again." Well, since his next try would be the last one, he decided that this was not very comforting advice, try again, but he was going to try it and see if he could get it done. And much to his amazement, he started moving down the rock wall. He was keeping his feet parallel, and he was moving and moving down with some confidence until about halfway down, the rock face dipped in, kind of like a hole, and he found himself what he felt like to be trapped. And so what would one do in this situation? Naturally, for many of us, he froze. Didn't move. He didn't know how to get out of this. And the instructor waited and waited for a small eternity, hoping he would thaw out. When she realized that he was showing no signs of life, she yelled up to him again, "Is anything wrong, Parker?" As if she needed to ask. Well, to this day, he says, I do not know what the source of that voice was that came out of my body, but he said, I don't want to talk about it. Hanging there in the air. I don't want to talk about it. How many times we have said that when we are going deep and we get worried? Well, the instructor yelled back up to Palmer, then I think it's time you learn the outward bound motto. Wonderful, he thought. I'm about to die, and she's giving me these mottos. But when she spoke the words, I have never forgotten them to this day, he writes. They were so true, and they empowered me to not only negotiate the rest of the cliff without incident, it has been serving me in my life ever since. And that motto is, if you can't get out of it, get into it. If you can't get out of it, get into it. He says, bone deep, I knew there was no way out of the situation except to go deeper. And with that knowledge, my body began to move. Parker's story shows us quite clearly the challenges of vocational work, because it is going deep, and there'll be surprises, and there'll be places that are unexpected, and we get worried and we'll freeze up. So this year, together, if you can't get out of it, I want all of us together to get into it here at All Souls, to do the work, to go deeper. We only get this one life. Let's do something amazing with it. And if you're already doing amazing work, let's do it even more and share it more widely. If you can't get out of it, let's get in it together, All Souls. Thank you.